The sound of steel slamming against steel echoed through D Block like a hammer in a tomb. Inmate 7160, officially known as Marcus Red Dunley, had stopped counting the days since his transfer to Ironridge Federal Penitentiary. Not because he lost track, he chose to forget. Time in a place like this wasn't a line, it was a circle, a never-ending loop of lights, noise, and silence that could drive a sane man into madness. He didn't belong here, not really. Not with the murderers and gang enforcers and broken men who had long stopped dreaming. Red had made a mistake, a big one, no doubt, but life without parole for a botched robbery where no one even got hurt? That wasn't justice. That was a cage built to break his spirit. From the outside, Ironridge looked like something out of a war movie. Thick concrete walls, watchtowers with sharpshooters, and a double perimeter of electrified fencing. Inside, it was worse. The real war was happening every day between men who had nothing left to lose. Blood on the floor of the shower didn't surprise anyone. Screams in the night were just part of the background noise. Guards turned their backs. Sometimes they were worse than the inmates. Red kept his head down, read every law book the prison library could give him, and worked in the laundry room 6 days a week. That's where he met Rico, a twitchy ex-gang member from East LA, who claimed he'd tunneled out of juvie with a spoon once. And there was Johnson, an ex-Marine doing 20 years for desertion, quiet and full of scars no one asked about. Together they were ghosts, not part of any crew, not on anyone's radar, but even ghosts can dream. And Red had a plan. The seed was planted on his second year inside after witnessing his bunkmate take his own life with a makeshift rope made from a bedsheet. The man had been counting down the days to parole. The guards forgot to check on him for almost 6 hours. That was Ironridge, a place where hope was a liability. What made Red different wasn't just the will to survive. It was the burning belief that this wasn't the end of his story. Every locked door, every security camera, every monotonous head count became part of a mental map he was drawing, slowly, meticulously. Not because he was sure it would work, but because doing nothing would mean surrendering his mind. Was it courage, or insanity dressed up as ambition? He'd lie awake at night, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, picturing every step, every turn, every second that would matter when, he made his move. He wasn't a fighter, not like the others, but he had the one thing Ironridge couldn't take from him, a reason. His mother was dying on the outside. Letters came from his sister once every few months, updating him about missed treatments, mounting bills, and how much she still believed in his innocence, even when the rest of the world had forgotten his name. Red didn't want to die in a cell while the last person who loved him faded away without saying goodbye. And maybe that's all it takes to snap the line between reason and madness. One person, one memory, one final straw. In the mess hall one afternoon, Red looked around. A guard was laughing with a known meth dealer. Another was slipping pills to a white supremacist with neck tattoos. Cameras were pointed, but off and off, blind spots everywhere. And that's when the question shifted. Was it really impossible to escape, or had everyone simply accepted it as truth? By year 3, Red wasn't just dreaming of escape. He was preparing for it. It started with socks. Not the socks themselves, but what they hid. Red had discovered something odd during his 3rd month working laundry. A tiny vent near the back dryer. Rusted over and likely forgotten. Most would have missed it. But Red noticed the temperature dropped near it, and one day when no one was watching, he knelt and pressed his hand against the wall. A breeze, airflow. That meant space behind the wall. A tunnel, a shaft, something. He didn't tell Rico or Johnson right away. This wasn't something to be blurted out in the yard or shared during lunch. In Ironridge, secrets were more valuable than cigarettes or shanks. Information got you power, or killed. So Red watched, listened, took mental notes for weeks. The laundry schedule, guard rotations. When the camera in the hall outside blinked. When it didn't. Eventually, when the time was right, he pulled Johnson aside during a routine trash run. "What would you say if I told you there's a way out?" Johnson didn't answer at first. He just looked at Red, the way someone looks at a man holding a grenade with the pin halfway out. Then, "I'd say you better be real sure." Rico was easier to convince, maybe because he had less to lose, maybe because deep down he was always itching for a chance to go out in a blaze of glory. The plan took shape in fragments, never spoken out loud all at once. The three of them knew better. Every conversation sounded casual: football scores, celebrity gossip, food they missed. But tucked into their words were times, objects, maps, and tools. Morse code through facial expressions, a blink for yes, a cough for no. Rico worked kitchen duty. He started collecting bits of metal, worn-down utensils, and a couple broken mop handles. Johnson handled trash and occasionally worked the tool room. He lost a screwdriver that no one reported. Red, still in laundry, began loosening screws on the back vent one at a time, slipping them into his sock, replacing them with dummies made of soap and dust-painted brown. It took 4 months. When they finally opened the vent, they found a shaft, narrow, full of mold and rat droppings, but navigable. It led down behind the foundation and into an old access tunnel built during the prison's original construction decades ago. Abandoned, unlit, barely big enough to crawl through. It smelled like rust and despair, but it was a way out. They dubbed the operation Project Ghost. No drama, no alarms, no explosions or riots. Just a silent slip through shadows while the rest of the prison slept. But even ghosts had to be careful. One wrong move, one suspicious glance, one guard who decided to actually do his job, and it was over. And there were close calls. Once, Rico's stash of makeshift tools was discovered, but the guard who found them was crooked. $50 through a cousin on the outside, and the guy pretended he never saw a thing. Another time, Johnson got caught slipping into the tool shed after hours. He took the beating without saying a word, lying to the warden's face, black eye swelling shut. Red worried it was all falling apart, that this wasn't bravery. It was suicide in slow motion. Was he gambling 3 lives on a hallucination? Could anyone really crawl through a crumbling tunnel beneath a federal prison and reach freedom? But then came the fire drill. They'd learned that every third Thursday, a fire alarm test triggered a brief 2-minute shutdown of the security cameras near the laundry exit. Just 2 minutes, but 2 minutes was enough, if everything else went perfectly, so they prepared. On the night before the next drill, Red made the final move. He removed the vent panel completely, leaving only a cardboard cutout in its place, painted to match the rust. A guard might not even notice unless he touched it. Johnson prepped their stolen clothes, faded delivery uniforms swiped from the laundry and restitched to look new. Rico hid their last stash of food under a trash bin by the tunnel entrance. They didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the alarm went off at 8:17 a.m. sharp. The guards barely looked up, just the usual chaos, inmates in lines, drills called out, fake urgency. But in the laundry room, Red, Johnson, and Rico were already moving. The vent came off in one swipe. They were inside the tunnel within 30 seconds. As Red crawled, inches from Johnson's boots, sweat pouring from his forehead despite the cold, the thought hit him hard. This is it. No turning back. Was this genius, or had he truly lost his mind? Either way, the walls were behind them now. The tunnel wasn't just narrow, it was suffocating. Every breath Red took tasted like mold, rust, and years of forgotten filth. The ceiling pressed so low he could barely lift his head, and the walls hugged his shoulders with cold, damp pressure. His elbows burned with every shuffle forward. Behind him, Rico grunted quietly. Ahead, Johnson moved like a ghost. They had one flashlight, a cheap plastic model Rico had stolen from a janitor cart, and they were rationing the battery. A small beam cut through the dark, bouncing off rotting pipes and discarded tools. Somewhere above them, the prison pulsed with life, alarms ending, guards shouting, metal doors slamming open and shut. But down here, it was silence, except for the scraping of knees on concrete. It was supposed to take 15 minutes to get through. Red had timed it. But halfway in, a support beam had collapsed years ago, leaving only a crawl space barely the size of a man's body. They hadn't prepared for this. Johnson tried to shift the beam, but it wouldn't budge. Red panicked for half a second. Was this it? Was this how they'd be found, crushed in a hole like rats? Johnson spoke without turning around. "Push!" "Don't think." "Push!" Red exhaled and squeezed his body under the beam. The concrete tore his shirt. He could feel a trickle of blood running down his back, but he made it through. One by one, they forced their way past the collapsed section until the tunnel opened slightly. A rusted hatch sat embedded in the ceiling, the only way out. Rico climbed up first and pressed his ear against the metal. "Quiet," he whispered. No footsteps. This hatch led to a maintenance shed just outside the rear prison wall. It hadn't been used in decades. Johnson had found its location in an old blueprint buried in the library archives. It was their gateway out, if it wasn't locked from the outside. Rico turned the handle. It squealed in protest, loud enough to freeze them in place, then popped loose. Sunlight. Red blinked, blinded. Actual sunlight, for the first time in years. Warm, blazing. They climbed up and into the shed. It was old, full of dust and broken rakes, but more importantly, empty. No guards, no motion sensors, just cracked wooden walls and the distant hum of a generator. Beyond the shed, the second fence, 12 feet tall, topped with razor wire. A death sentence for anyone stupid enough to try without a plan. But they had a plan. Inside one of the old toolboxes, they'd stashed their final trick, a homemade grappling hook made from broken pipe, bent into a wide U-shape, wrapped in rubber and cloth to muffle sound. Johnson tossed it perfectly on the first try. It latched onto the support beam beyond the fence. Red climbed first, his palms shredded, heart pounding with every foot. At the top, he threw an old army blanket over the razor wire, just like they'd practiced. No alarms, no motion sensors, just sky. One by one, they dropped down into the woods outside Ironridge. They ran, not in panic, in practiced silence. No dogs, no sirens, not yet. But they all knew it wouldn't stay quiet for long. They had a 10-minute head start at best. Red didn't dare look back. He was free, for now. And somewhere deep in his mind, the question rang again, louder than ever. Was this the act of a man who refused to give up, or a madman running toward the inevitable? The forest swallowed them. Thick pine trees lined the landscape like silent watchers, their branches casting jagged shadows in the late morning light. Red's legs ached, his lungs burned, but he kept running. Johnson was ahead, moving fast and low like a soldier back in his element. Rico trailed behind, limping slightly. He'd cut his leg on the fence coming down. They didn't speak. Every snapped twig felt like a gunshot. Every gust of wind sounded like a helicopter. They knew the clock had started the second they slipped past the outer wall. Ironridge's perimeter system was old, but not that old. If someone had found the hatch already, the dogs were coming. Their first stop was a drainage culvert nearly half a mile out, hidden under a collapsed footbridge. Johnson had scouted it weeks earlier during his rare work detail outside the walls. Inside, they caught their breath and changed clothes, ditching the prison uniforms and slipping into faded jeans and plain hoodies they'd stashed days before in a waterproof bag. No names, no jokes, just movement. Red's mind raced. They had 12 hours, maybe less. That's how long it would take before the local news caught wind, before state troopers and U.S. Marshals got involved, before gas stations and bus stops became traps. They split up after that, planned in advance. Rico would head south toward the border. His cousin in El Paso owed him a favor and worked with people who knew how to move ghosts. Johnson disappeared west into the mountains. No explanation, just a nod. Red didn't ask questions. He, meanwhile, was headed north, to Chicago, to his sister, to the one person who'd never stopped believing he deserved a second chance. The journey was brutal. He hitchhiked at night, slept under bridges, and avoided cameras like poison. He paid cash, always small bills, always from the roll they'd stashed long ago, smuggled in by Rico's contacts. Food came from gas stations and vending machines. His beard grew fast. He looked like a drifter, unremarkable, but fear never left him. In the corner store bathroom, he scrubbed his hands raw, trying to get rid of the dried blood from the tunnel. On day 3, he saw his face on a television in a diner window. 3 escapees from Ironridge Penitentiary still at large, public warned not to approach. The newscaster didn't mention the rotting tunnels, or the corrupt guards, or the 10 years Red had served for a crime he hadn't truly committed. Just his photo, his file, his number, 7,160. He kept moving. Every stranger was a threat. Every step toward his sister's apartment in Southside felt like walking a tightrope over a minefield. The street was quiet when he finally reached her building, 5 days after the escape. Rain fell lightly. He buzzed her apartment once, then again. No answer. His heart pounded. Maybe she wasn't home. Maybe she was scared. Maybe, worst of all, she'd already turned him in. But then, the door clicked. She was standing in the hallway in an oversized hoodie, eyes wide, mouth trembling, and without a word, she pulled him inside. For the first time in years, Red allowed himself to breathe. But it wasn't over, not even close. Because outside that apartment, in the cold gray city, law enforcement was tightening the net. Marshals, helicopters, facial recognition technology, anonymous tips. No place to hide for long. Was freedom worth living like this? Every night, Red lay awake wondering, was he brave or just broken? Red lasted 12 days on the outside, 12 days of stolen time, 12 days where every step was borrowed from fate, and every breath came with the weight of 1,000 eyes watching. On the 13th morning, just before sunrise, the knock came. 3 short raps, then silence. His sister froze. They both knew what it meant. Red didn't run. There was nowhere left to go. Instead, he stood by the window, watching the flashing red and blue lights reflect across the glass. He could hear them outside, tactical boots in formation, muffled voices over radios, metal clinking. No warning, no demands, just an army. He walked to the door, turned the handle, and stepped out into the hallway. Hands up, no resistance. He was face down on the floor in seconds, knee in his back, zip ties digging into his wrists. He didn't say a word. The next time the world saw Red Dunley, it was on every major news channel. His mugshot side by side with Rico and Johnson. Headlines screaming, "Daring movie-style prison escape comes to an end." Journalists called him a mastermind. Others called him dangerous. A few, mostly online, called him a symbol. A man who refused to be buried alive in a broken system. He was transferred to a high-security black site facility in Colorado, the kind they don't talk about in official records. 23 hours a day in isolation, no windows, no books, no name, just inmate 7160-A. Rico never made it to the border. He was gunned down during a traffic stop in New Mexico. No trial, no warning, 2 bullets to the chest. Johnson, gone, vanished into the woods. Rumors said he made it across state lines. Some claimed he was hiding in an off-grid cabin in Montana. Others believed he never left the forest, a ghost in camo, watching the world pass him by. No one ever found him. Back in Ironridge, things changed, slightly. An internal investigation exposed a dozen corrupt guards. Maintenance reports were suddenly reviewed. Ventilation systems were checked. Security was tightened. But no one admitted fault. When reporters asked how 3 inmates could disappear from a federal prison without a trace, the warden simply said, "Desperation makes men do crazy things." And that was it. No apology, no reform, just another brick in the wall. Years passed. Red became a legend behind bars. Inmates whispered his name like a campfire story. Some called him a hero, others called him an idiot. But they all remembered him, because he tried, not for glory, not for headlines, but for a chance, however small, to reclaim something the system had stolen: his life, his voice, his choice. And maybe that's what made him different. He didn't just escape a prison. He defied the rules written in stone. He cracked open a door that everyone else had accepted was sealed forever. And for a moment, just a moment, he tasted freedom. Was it worth it? Only he could answer that. In the end, Red sat alone in a windowless cell. No sunlight, no clocks, just memories. But when he closed his eyes, he wasn't in Colorado anymore. He was running through the woods, breathing cold air, with the sky wide open above him. And for a man they tried to bury alive, even 12 days of freedom was enough to prove one thing: he was never crazy, he was just awake.